government is headed.
You ever hear of the Holocaust?
Yeah.
In fact, I like to call that the Waco Holocaust. The government deliberately burned those people. There was no excuse for it. There was no reason for it. They simply set the buildings on fire and burned them to death.
So you don't accept the government's explanation they had to do it because there was child molestation and illegal
we got to protect
stockpiles
the
of
children
weapons.
by killing them.
And
I remember yelling that at my kids. If somebody's going to kill you, I'll do it. I didn't really mean it, but the government does.
well, do you think that is something that we're going to be seeing more of in the future?
Unfortunately, it's probably the wave of the future. I read that strongly.
What do you think the responses will be of people who share your opinions?
I honestly don't know. I'm waiting to see what happens. There are a lot of people who share a lot of what I believe in, share the same basic beliefs I do, but are still enamored enough of the government so they think they can solve the problems through government action, through controlling the system, through using court decisions in order to make their point, when in reality, when they do that, they're stepping into a trap.
Well, it's unlikely that if the government is going to become as tyrannical as you predict, that they would ever surrender power voluntarily.
They won't.
Therefore, what you're saying to me is that a revolution is needed. Is that what you're saying?
In effect, I am, yes, but I don't believe in us having a revolution because it'd be infiltrated before we ever started. My solution to the problem is that the American people have to learn the Bill of Rights well enough to live it instinctively, to say, hey, you can't do that as soon as they do one of these nasty things that infringes on our rights. Each individual person who gives a darn has to say, stop, go no further. You have no right to do that.
A few years ago, there was an organization called the Posse Comitatus that had been surfacing out west. And I was wondering if you could explain to us, what does the Posse Comitatus mean to you, and do you think that this concept plays a role in restoring our rights?
It could. Posse Comitatus means basically the power of the county. Or in the words of the people of that day, the sheriff could take every able-bodied man in the community in order to go after lawbreakers and bring them to justice. Unfortunately, that power has been perverted, and some of the people who started the modern Posse Comitatus have got headstrong and tried to right their own wrongs rather than go by the Bill of Rights in implementing the posse. So it's gotten a fairly bad name these days. I'd like to see it organized. I'd like to see it have as its organizational concept the Bill of Rights, so that we could start insisting that Bill of Rights be honored and have people to back it up. And that fits in with something else that you wanted to discuss, and that is the citizens' grand jury.
Oh, yes.
When we have a citizens' grand jury, you turn indictments after government criminal, and nothing comes of it. There's going to be an awful lot of unhappy people, and there's where we recruit our posse members from.
This has actually started in a couple of states, I think in Utah and Hawaii.
It was, but as far as I could tell, it was abused.
How would you say it was abused?
The persons who were in charge, used the posse for their own personal ends rather than to implement the Bill of Rights across the board.
I could just imagine some woman going through a divorce, turning her husband over to a citizens' grand jury and a bunch of posses recruited out of a local tavern.
Well, if they were recruited properly, they'd acquit her husband, probably.
Well,
or
we don't know.
They'd find in his favor, probably.
I think one thing, whenever you have institutions that are created by people, that the institution is only as good as the people who are running it. And maybe what you're really hitting on is that your complaint is not so much about government, but about human nature.
Well, a large part of my complaint is about human nature, because it's human nature is keeping us from being free. To be a free, independent, and happy people is very, very simple if we go by the Bill of Rights. But unfortunately, a lot of people have their own personal axes to grind, and so consequently they won't support the Bill of Rights. I'll give you an example. No person shall be deprived of liberty, meaning anybody that wants to come to this country has the right to come. That's
So you oppose
immigration laws are unconstitutional.
Well, we certainly agree on that.
Now, when they get to this land, they still have to find a place to roost, and if we won't let them in, then they better go back to where they came from. But if we want to let them in, we want to give them a job, They have an absolute right to come here and produce and buy the goods that we produce so that we can become wealthy right along with them. And that's what, by the way, what made our country great in the first place, when immigration laws were very weak and couldn't stop a lot of people from coming here. Constantly we got a lot of workers in who were willing to earn their keep and who made our country great. So you'll find an awful lot of people who want to keep people out of this country. We've got an exclusive. We can keep people out, they say. And they'll go against the Bill of Rights in order to accomplish their goal. That's why I say we've got to learn the Bill of Rights well enough to know where to draw the line, to know when wrong is being done and when it isn't. And basically you go by the principle, has this person harmed or threatened anybody? And if he hasn't harmed or threatened anybody, he's got to be left alone.
Well, the government does define harm very broadly. Not paying the taxes harms people.
Who does it harm?
It harms those people who have to pay to make up for what you don't pay.
Except that they don't have to pay either, except voluntarily, and that's the way it should be.
Well, that's your interpretation of the tax code.
Look at Allen Piper's Strike Service. They get money from satisfied customers, and that's what the government should do. Say, look, we're offering you this much service for the year. Are you willing to pay X number of dollars for it? And if you're willing to pay, fine. All right.
But it doesn't work that way. And if you don't pay your taxes, if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to go to jail. And no politician has ever stopped taxing.
Too often, although I have seen people who have not paid taxes and haven't gone to jail. Not enough of them.
They're at risk.
Yeah, they're always at risk.
Maybe more power to them, but they're at big risk.
They are at risk. I agree with you.
If they don't get them the first time, they'll come back and try a second time.
Oh, that's probably.
And
that's one of the problems. The government has the house. You've seen a gambling joint where you're going, you got to pay a certain percentage to the house, whether you like it or not. Well, it's the same thing with living in a community. You got to pay a certain percentage to the house, whether you like it or not. And as soon as you allow the house to run it, when they don't really, in the case of a gambling joint, the guy owns the joint. But in the case of the whole country, the government doesn't own the whole country. And
yes,
yet it's like
yes, they do.
No,
you haven't read your law of eminent domain. They do own the whole country.
No, they don't.
It's just a question of making a fix. If they want to take it back your property, they have to give you some compensation for what you paid for it.
I've yet to see a deed that said the government owns all the property.
Have you ever heard of an eminent domain case that was lost by the government?
No.
All right.
And every eminent domain case that was won by the government, a crime was committed by the government because they have no right to that. They have no right to declare themselves the owners of the whole country, and therefore you've got to pay us a percentage to the house.
Well,
they don't have that right.
Apparently, the same judges whom you are at war with believe that they do.
I know they do. Obviously, they're trained that way in school. And most people believe that because they're told that in public schools when they go through that brainwashing emporium.
Eminent domain is hot. It can be arbitrary. It
sure can.
Appealing it is an exercise in futility, but the Supreme Court has said it's the law of the land.
And the Supreme Court is wrong, and the jury can prove them wrong any time by acquitting a person who's brought to trial on those charges. And that's why, again, the people should be familiar with the Bill of Rights so that they can know when the person is being persecuted by the government and say, heck, no, I won't convict.
Andy, what next? What are you going to do to finally get the people to see your point of view?
Not much until I get enough people to know the Bill of Rights. That's why I produced it on a big basis and hand it out to anybody that's interested in it. Because I believe that we're not going to be a free people until we live by that Bill of Rights.
If people want to get a copy of the Bill of Rights, where can they write to? I'll let you give the address out.
Constitutional Revival, Post Office Box 3182, Enfield, Connecticut, 06083.
Okay, we'll give you a chance. We'll put that on letters on the show after we edit. Anyway, I just wanted to wrap up by saying, what do you think of our government's intervention in places like Somalia and Haiti?
It's criminal activity, sir.
Why?
Truly criminal activity. Show me where in the Constitution the President has the right to take our troops beyond our borders to defend our country. It's not there. He's got the authority to defend the United States of America. He does not have the authority to go on adventures in overseas lands with our troops. You sometimes might be able to make the case where you can prove conclusively that so-and-so was about to attack us, no ifs, ands, or buts, and that we took a retaliatory strike beforehand. You might be able to justify that. But otherwise, there's no excuse for the government to take our troops outside of our country to interfere in other countries' affairs.